Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I'm so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that's going to energize your business and maybe help your social media marketing and help you stay social. Because after all, don't you want to be the business everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I'm so stoked today to have Kathy Walterhouse with me. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much for having me, Lorraine.
Kathy, would you tell my audience a little bit about what you do and who you serve?
Absolutely. So I'm a sales expert. I've sold close to $1 billion. I'm ex-corporate. And since I've left corporate, what I do is I work with go-getter entrepreneurs as well as high growth companies, because I want you to unleash your sales. And I want you to know that sales is not that hard.
Yeah, and that's what everybody is scared of. When everybody thinks of sales, they think about, that car salesman,
right?
Yeah, exactly. But what I want to ask you is, I saw something, I don't know if it was on your website or what, but it says that sales is not a dirty word. Right. So why is sales not a dirty word?
Well, I've only when I got into sales did I discover that. But it's interesting that you said something about a used cars salesman, because before I was in sales, that's what I thought it was. And a lot of it has to do with like whatever experience you have, like whether it's growing up or it's, if you're, buying something, and almost everyone has to go and buy a car sometime. And I'm not saying that all car salesmen are this way, because they're not. But a lot of people have that experience where you're not getting listened to by the salesperson. They're trying to hammer you over the head. You probably feel a little bit icky, and you know that you're just a number, that person only wants commission. So that makes it dirty. The way that I teach people to sell is I want them to think about the customer first. And the minute you start thinking about the customer, like, what can you help that customer do? What problem can you help them with? What can you help, like, remove the pain that they're having? How can you help them reach their goals? When you start and really, really focus on the customer, first off, a couple things happen. You no longer are feeling that sales is slimy or that it's dirty, because you're actually trying to help somebody. But the other thing, for everybody that's listening out there, if you've ever gotten really nervous when the thought comes that you have to sell something to someone, and if you're in business, eventually you're going to get there. You're going to have to sell something to someone. The minute you change it, you reframe it that you're helping someone and you focus on the other person, poof, all the fears, all that stuff, the jitters, they go away. Because think about it. Like, doesn't it feel good when you're helping someone?
Absolutely, it does. So I have a question for you. So you triggered a lot of stuff when you were talking, and
hopefully good triggers.
Because it's good. A lot of times when we think of, like, for instance, marketing, right? We always bring it in terms of what we think a customer needs or wants, instead of really listening to a customer or a potential client, I should say. And what I was going to say is that I think it's really important that we focus on that, on what they really need, and really listen. And I think that's what a lot of people today are not doing. They're not listening at all to what somebody needs or wants. And one of my biggest things is connection. Mm-hmm. And it is so important. I like to consider myself a master connector. I love connecting with people and getting to know people. What about you when it comes to sales? What do you think is so important about that connection piece?
Well, the connection piece is it's the relationship. It's what people feel about you and what you feel about other people. And also, is there a trust factor? But what's interesting is that you said something about wants and needs and how people don't necessarily listen. Again, it's all one-sided, right? You're going back to, quote unquote, I would say the used car salesman type of approach. And what I want people to think about instead is this. I want you to imagine that you are in Alaska, and you're in Alaska and you see an iceberg. When you see that iceberg, you only see about 20% of the iceberg out of the water. 80% is actually underneath the water. And that's the same thing when you're talking about your customers or your potential customers. What you may know about them without talking to them is 20%. And when you meet with them, if you just don't start digging and trying to find all the really juicy stuff that's underneath and that 80%, you're going to have a hard time selling to them. And you get to that 80% by asking questions, but most importantly, by listening. Because somebody can tell you, hey, I want a lower price. So they just said, I want a lower price. But then you think, okay, why do they need a lower price? Could it be maybe they want to look good for their boss? That maybe they have a budget to meet? Maybe it's a power play. There's a myriad of reasons. And so it's important to figure out, okay, what do they want and what do they need? And you can only do that by asking questions and then by listening. Because as you listen, there's going to be more questions that pop up, because there's going to be like little itty bitty pieces of gold that they're going to say. And then you can go back to them and ask them. The best question to ask is why.
Yeah. I mean, I read a book once, and actually 2 books on sales, and one of them was like, and I don't even remember the context of it, but it was like 5 powerful questions that you should ask when you're trying to get a client. And I was like thinking, I believe that there's no cookie cutter approach. Mm-hmm. But what would you say? There's a lot of people that, will say that like sales are icky and I feel uncomfortable. And I had one person once that said to me, I'm not a good question asker. I don't know what questions to ask. What would you say is an important framework of a question that one should ask when they're, on a sales call?
Again, it's when that person says they're not a good question asker, let me address that first. So think about like when you're dating. Well, when you go on a date, you have a conversation, right, with the person that you're with. So if you're not asking them questions, what are you doing? You're just telling them stuff. So when you're telling them stuff, you're not really caring about that other individuals. When you really want to figure out who that person is, you ask questions. So everyone, unless you are like, really isolated and let's say you're a monk somewhere where you don't talk to anyone. Everyone sells. You just don't know that you're doing. So that's the first thing I want to say. And then as far as the questions, I'm kind of on the same, cut from the same cloth as you. I don't think there's necessarily any set questions. I do like the question why, because why opens up a lot. When somebody makes a statement, like this happened, and so therefore I'm not going to buy this. You can start digging in. Okay, so tell me a little bit about it, and why do you really feel that way? That why is such a great way to open a conversation. It's great to dig. But it's not just necessarily that, is that you have to spend a lot of time really listening and observing, even body language. If you're lucky enough to be in the room or be on camera with somebody, if you observe the body language, that will tell you a lot. There's a lot of things that they tell you. If somebody has their arms crossed, that means they're blocking you off. If, if they're moving around a lot, sometimes that's a sign that they're not comfortable. And then you have to figure out, okay, so why may they not be that comfortable with you? And then sometimes it's your body language that you're giving them. So if they're fidgeting around a lot, if you start mirroring some of the things that they're doing, if they're sitting back, you sit back, and start, and it'll be really interesting for you to see that all of a sudden there's almost like a sigh of relief of people settle, because they no longer feel antsy being in your presence if they think that you're more like them.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I do a lot of networking. So it's like, I notice all the time when somebody's uncomfortable. I can read that really well, or I get uncomfortable sometimes in certain situations. So it's like, and you can feel it, but once they, once you start talking to someone and get to know them a little bit better, when I go networking, for instance, I never really talk about business right away.
Right.
I am very uncomfortable when somebody comes up to me and just says, hey, I do this, this, and this, and blah, blah, blah. And basically, you should buy my garbage. I've had that at a networking event, and that makes me very uncomfortable, because how do they even know that I need their garbage? Right.
Right.
It's like, find out first. I may not even be your target market, for Pete's sakes. It's like, oh, that's what I get all the time. It's like, and it's the same thing when I'm online too. When I'm on LinkedIn, somebody will ask me if I need digital marketing services, and they didn't bother to even read my profile. And that's kind of annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like it's spam. I mean, in a networking situation, you can be spam because basically that person's just coming up to you and saying, buy my stuff.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about you. They don't know if it's a right fit or not. And that's the one thing I would have to say about sales. That when you flip it around, it's all about the customer. If that customer is not a right fit, if you cannot help that customer, the best thing to do is to tell them that, and then, walk away. And maybe if you know someone else, refer that person to them. And what's going to happen when you do that, 9 times out of 10, that person's going to go, wow, this person is really, really cares about me. I could probably refer Sally and Sue and all these other people, because I know that she will take care of them, rather than just trying to go and get a big fat commission check. So you're going to get a lot more referrals. You're going to get a name in whatever industry that you're in. And then when I say a name in the industry, that works both ways, right? If you're one of these ones that's hard hitting, that hammers people over the head, or is just like what you said, comes up and says, hey, just buy my stuff, you're going to get that reputation. People are not going to want to talk to you.
Yeah. And, one of the things is I have this vivid thing in my head about this financial planner that goes around to different, and everybody, we all talk, they talk, and the different networking groups. Oh no, here he comes again, because that's what he does, and it makes you feel really uncomfortable. So it's really important that when you are networking and when you are doing, having a sales conversation, that you try to get to know the client first. I mean, I think or the potential client, I should say, first. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, because we're both business owners, and you have a great track record. You've actually made quite a lot of sales. And so that kind of makes you an expert. And so so you said, I think earlier, that you came out of corporate world. Is that?
Yes, that's right.
So what made you want to become, I have a lot of people who are listening to this that are startups. Some of them are really been in business for a long time, and others are toying with the idea of they're going to leave corporate world and maybe go into business themselves. So what was the deciding factor for you for leaving the corporate world and just moving into this business?
Well, it's kind of interesting, because even when I was in the corporate world, I always approached. So when you're in sales, first off, you have a territory typically, Or I also was in sales management where I managed a lot of sales reps. But let's just look at the territory itself. That territory was my business. I approached it as an entrepreneur. And I think because I did that, that was the reason that I always was successful. And when you approach it as an entrepreneur, you have a passion, right? And I never worked for a company that I didn't believe in the product. And that's a really big pillar. First off, you got to love what it is that you do and the product that you sell. If you don't, you got to get out. And so entrepreneurs, what I have found, are really passionate about what it is that they do. And they want to make a difference in the world. Typically, there are some entrepreneurs out there that are like, yeah, I'm going to make $1 bazillion trillion, right? You know, that's what their goal is. But, I think for me, the transition was pretty easy because I still love working with the entrepreneurs, because I was an entrepreneur when I was in the corporate world. And then also, in essence, I managed, because when I was able to bring my own people in, that's the people that I hired. I managed a team of entrepreneurs that felt really passionate about what it was that they did, felt really passionate about the customers that they sell, and really wanting to make a difference. And they had relationships with their customer, which even in the online space, you can still have relationships with your customers. You know, a lot of times I will get, it's kind of funny, you know, like I'll get these messages like, oh my gosh, I really love that last podcast. Or I love what you said in your email about this, or this is the reason that I'm contacting you because something caught my eye that you said, or that was on your webpage, or whatever it is. Or again, somebody said, hey, if you need help in sales, you need to go to Kathy because she's really going to help you. She's not one of these ones that's just there to grab the money and go.
Yeah, that's awesome. One piece of advice, could you give what there may be somebody struggling out there in their business. What would be one piece of advice that you would give?
Oh my gosh, I have like a bazillion pieces of advice. But I would say for me, if you're struggling in your business, find somebody, and I did this in sales. Find someone that can be your mentor. I was really, really lucky very early in my sales career because I was terrified of selling and I didn't know what I was doing. And I had made an appointment with somebody that would have been like my dream customer. I remember sitting in the car going, I can't go in. I'm terrified. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I literally had to peel my hands off the steering wheel and made myself go in. Lucky for me, because the CEO of that company ended up becoming my mentor. And he taught me everything I know about sales, about negotiations. Their company ended up going public, but a lot of it is caring. Like he cared for everybody that walked in the door, whether you were selling something to him or if it was a customer coming in. So find somebody in your industry who's doing really well. See if they can take you under their wing and kind of show you the ropes. You know, anywhere that you struggle, if you struggle in social media, find someone that's really good in social media. If you struggle in sales, find somebody that's really good in sales. You need to go and learn. And always what I always did was I always tried to learn from the best. And as I changed into different companies, because I changed, a few times, not very often, in a different company, I found whoever was number one in sales and literally became their best friend because I wanted to find out everything they were doing. And eventually, after less than a year, I became number one in sales, but it's only because I learned through them.
Yeah, here's the thing. There's always somebody that knows more than you do. And it's always good to learn from them. And you always need to be learning. you know?
Always. I mean, I'm always out there. I'm in a couple of masterminds. I'm always learning. Always, always, always. I don't have all the answers. I even learned still about selling because there's always something new. There's always something that I had never heard of before. And so why not keep on learning?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been really wonderful. I mean, you have so many subject points that we could have possibly talked, we could be here all day, but I, want to, if there was somebody that resonated with you, how could they contact you, and what is something that we can give to them just to get introduced to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can go to theprofessionalrulebreaker.com and you can actually book a free session with me. And especially if you're struggling in sales, I will take a real quick look at your strategy and kind of help you with like the low hanging fruit, as well. And then if you're really in the beginning stages, you can go to theprofessionalrulebreaker.com/ultimate. And there is a download of questions that perhaps you should be asking, your questions that you should ask yourself and questions that you should ask your potential customer as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I want to thank you for being just such a wonderful guest. And to everyone out there, until next week, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at BizGoneSocial for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.